You made $100 million from a crash. In 1929. While families lost savings. While fortunes disappeared in a single afternoon. While the great bull market was being dragged through the street like a broken idol. You were on the other side of the trade. Short. Calm. Waiting. By morning, they called you a genius. By night, they called you a monster. Then a message came from someone powerful enough to steady the country. Stop selling. Not please. Stop. That was the moment you should have understood the truth. You were no longer trading the market. You had become part of its weather. But this story does not end with a mansion. It ends years later, in a quiet hotel room. No crowd. No ticker tape. No applause. Just a tired old speculator, a final note, and the silence that comes when the market inside your head finally stops moving. Level 1, the board. Before anyone feared you, you were a boy copying prices on a quotation board. You were not born into money. You were born into work. At 14, you escaped with hunger and almost nothing else. All day, numbers arrived. Railroads. Steel. Cotton. Copper. To everyone else, they were prices. To you, they were fingerprints. A stock would rise, pause, hesitate, fail, recover, and rise again. You watched long enough to notice the thing that would save and ruin your life. The market had habits. It had rhythm. It had fear. It had greed. And if you could read those emotions before the crowd admitted they were feeling them, you could take money from men who thought money made them intelligent. Level 2, the first taste. You started with a few dollars. Not enough for respect. Enough for a bet. So you went to the cheap rooms. Bucket shops. Fast money. Bad air. Men pretending they had systems. You did not need status there. You needed movement. And movement was the one language you already spoke. The first win did not make you rich. It did something worse. It made you certain. Your hands shook when the money came back larger. Not from fear. From recognition. Some part of you had been waiting your whole life to discover that the world had a weakness. And you had found it. Soon, the bucket shops banned you. To a normal person, that might have sounded like a warning. To you, it sounded like proof. Level 3, the bigger room. Then you entered the real market. And the real market made your talent feel smaller. In the cheap rooms, you only needed to be right for a moment. In the real market, you needed execution. Liquidity. Timing. Patience. You needed to survive the distance between the price you saw and the price you could actually get. That distance is where fortunes disappear. You won. You lost. You won again. You lost again. Every time you went broke, the money disappeared. But the belief did not. Most people lose everything and become careful. You lost everything and became more convinced that the next version of you would be unstoppable. That is the dangerous part of talent. It gives you just enough evidence to ignore pain. Level 4, the panic. Then came the panic. Banks shook. Credit tightened. Rumors became facts. Fear moved through the financial system like smoke under a locked door. Most men saw disaster. You saw direction. That is what made you frightening. You did not need the market to be happy. You only needed it to be honest. And panic is very honest. So you sold short. While the crowd begged for recovery, you positioned for collapse. The bids disappeared. The market broke. And you made millions. Then the message came. A powerful banker wanted the selling to stop. You stood down. Maybe out of patriotism. Maybe out of calculation. Maybe because even you understood that if you win too much in the wrong room, the room starts looking for ways to remove you. The market rewards you for being right. Society punishes you for being right at the wrong moment. Level 5, the rule. After the panic, people wanted your secret. The formula. The signal. The exact line where poverty turns into power. But the rule was almost insulting. Do not fight the market. If the tide is rising, buy the strongest names. If the tide is falling, do not marry your favorite stock. If you are wrong, get out. If you are right, sit still. That last part is where most people fail. Profit makes you impatient. Loss makes you defensive. Hope makes you stupid. Fear makes you early. The big money was not made by constantly doing something. It was made by being right, and then having the nerve to do nothing. But knowing a rule and obeying it are different skills. You had the first one. The second one came and went. Level 6, the Big Short. Then came the Great Bull Market. America did not just believe in stocks. America became stocks. Clerks bought on margin. Drivers gave tips. Small investors spoke like industrialists. Everyone had a reason why prices could only go higher. The market was no longer a market. It was a national mood. And you had spent your life reading moods. You watched the leaders weaken. You watched rallies fail. You watched the tape lose its confidence. To the crowd, the market still looked strong. To you, it looked tired. So you made the trade everyone hates until it works. You got short. Then came margin calls. Then forced selling. Then panic. Then silence. You made around $100 million. You did not create the mania. You did not force people to borrow. But you understood the machine well enough to profit when it broke. And sometimes that looks very close to guilt. Level 7, the crown. After the crash, you had everything people think money is supposed to give. Homes. Cars. Yachts. Servants. Access. Rooms where nobody asks the price. You were not just rich. You were a symbol. The man who saw it coming. The man who bet against a nation and won. But symbols cannot simply live. They have to remain symbols. If you once made $100 million in a crash, what is an ordinary win supposed to feel like? If you once stood above the market, how do you become just another man at a desk? The tape became more than information. It became proof that you still existed. Without the next great call, who were you? Without the market, who were you? Level 8, the bill. The bill did not arrive all at once. It arrived as bad trades. Broken discipline. Expensive rooms. Cold marriages. The belief that a man who came back before can always come back again. Then came bankruptcy. Again. Not the bankruptcy of a young man still learning. The bankruptcy of a legend who had already won everything. That kind of failure is different. When an ordinary trader loses money, he loses money. When a legend loses money, he loses the story holding him together. You tried to rebuild. You wrote rules. You sold wisdom. You explained discipline to people who still believed discipline could be explained. But the market had changed. The rules had changed. And you had changed. Then came the final room. A hotel. A note. A tired man. You had spent your life studying exits. When to sell. When to cover. When to cut the loss. But the one exit you never mastered was the one from the game itself. Today, the screens are different. The tickers are faster. The orders are digital. The leverage is hidden behind cleaner interfaces. But the old machine is still there. A number moves. A feeling appears. The feeling becomes a decision. The decision becomes a life. Somewhere tonight, a person is staring at a chart with shaking hands. They think they are studying price. But price is studying them back. It is learning where they are impatient. Where they are proud. Where they need to be rescued by one perfect trade. That was your gift. You could see the crowd. That was your curse. You could not always see yourself. The greatest trade was not the short. Not the comeback. Not the $100 million. The greatest trade would have been the one you never made. The moment you looked at the tape, closed the book, and walked away while you still had yourself. But you did not. Because you did not just trade the market. You belonged to it.